Guardians of the B.L.A.D.E. by Adalene Martis. Chapter 6, Crawlspace, Defeat. The following morning, Therak stood outside her room and knocked softly. He was met with a long silence. When he finally opened the door, he was struck by Nyra's appearance as she sat on the edge of her bed. Her eyes were red and puffy. Her fur was matted in places, and her shoulders slumped as if under an invisible weight. Therak frowned. "Did you get any sleep at all?" Nyra shrugged, her voice flat. "I'm nocturnal." Therak's eyebrows raised. Nocturnal meant she was awake most of the night. Unlike in Panthera society, where being nocturnal was common, there were few nocturnal cats in Pheran society. They always had trouble fitting in. However, accommodations were given to them at work and school. On his home world, being nocturnal was treated as a sleep disorder, but it was actually a genetic condition passed on through the generations. Since he was diurnal, awake during the day, he would have to make concessions to Nyra if he wanted to care for her properly. Therak glanced past her into the room. The bed was still made, but the covers were mussed and visibly damp. The scent of stale sex hung in the air. Her heat had likely driven her to pleasure herself, and it was clear that she had been crying about what her urges forced upon her. She wasn't acting assertive towards him, though, so her heat must have been cooling. Therak hesitated, unsure of what to say. Finally he tried, "If you can't sleep, how about touring the facility? There are a few areas I could use your input on." She didn't respond at first, but then her ears perked slightly. "So you've finally come to beg for my help, huh?" she asked, a faint spark of interest breaking through her otherwise despondent demeanor. Therak snorted. "Beg, huh?" He paused to wrestle with his pride. Then with a small sigh, he said, "Fine. I admit it would be useful to have the perspective of a brilliant young engineer, Nyra. Would you please help this old cat?" Her tail twitched and her posture straightened a little. "Okay," she said, a trace of warmth creeping into her voice. "Let me get ready." Therak took her to his room so that she could freshen up in the attached bathroom, and then he went to the kitchen. He quickly seared a strip of dromedary thigh for Nyra and returned. By the time he'd gotten back, she had groomed herself and was looking somewhat professional. "Here's breakfast," he said while handing over the metal plate with the simple fare. "I didn't want to make you wait, so it isn't as nice as last time." She took it and sniffed. "Even if it's simple, it beats the lab-grown meat I'm used to eating." "Have you never had natural meat before?" Therak asked. Urmah were obligate carnivores, but they were a civilized species. Long ago they had outlawed killing for food, except in rare circumstances, like survival. Most Urmah ate lab-grown meat that was nothing but pure protein. Saying it wasn't good was an understatement. A body couldn't survive on it alone. Nyra licked the meat, savoring it as she sheared off its surface with her rough tongue. "I've had fresh meat a few times with my boyfriend, but even he couldn't afford to take me to fancy places for every meal. Most of the time I'd make do with whatever was on sale in the market. Protein packs, cream shakes, and eggs. Eggs are nice," Therak commented. "Not for every meal, they're not. I need real meat, especially on my heats," she said between licks. Therak's heart lifted as she savored the meal. He enjoyed watching her make happy mouth sounds. It made him want to keep cooking for her. When she was done, they left her room and made their way towards command. A fan kicked on as they entered, stirring dust made of skin cells, dirt, and shed fur. Therak felt somewhat embarrassed as he turned on the displays at the engineering station, which were covered in a thick layer of grime. Nyra grimaced but said nothing, as if she didn't expect anything different from a bachelor in his mid-50s who'd spent over 30 years alone. However, as the lines of error codes in the ship's systems started scrolling across the screen, a deep line furrowed in her brow. Ahem, he began, clearing his throat, while pointing to a red error code. As you can see, this is one of the main problems. I've been manually bypassing the power here to keep things running, but— Therak, Nyra interrupted, her ears flicking. You need help. Therak blinked. That's what I've been saying. No, I'm serious, she said. This is the worst list of error codes I've ever seen. Even my tests in school weren't this bad. There's no way to fix it all without going to a spaceport and getting new parts. We can print our own parts, Therak countered. No, you can't, said Nyra, balking. Yes, we can. We have a fabricator in engineering, said Therak. Nyra's eyes went wide and started shining. Do you want to see it? Therak added. Yes, she said, but not right now. This ship is in terrible condition. We could have a failure cascade at any moment. I need to figure out what order to perform the triage. As she looked over the error codes, she seemed to gain energy. Also, this place is filthy. I demand a sanitary work environment. Therak smirked. I'll have it clean for you by tomorrow, he promised. Is there anything else I can do for you, Miss Nyra? Nyra's mouth parted slightly. Her bearing shifted quite noticeably as she placed a hand on her hip and wagged a finger at him. As a matter of fact, there is something you can do. You can bring me my tool belt and get a tool belt of your own, she commanded. Therak raised a brow. Why do I need tools? Because you're going to help me, she said, jabbing a finger in his direction. If you don't want me to think you're enslaving me, you better work just as hard as I do. Therak's smirk widened into a broad grin. Yes, ma'am. His heartbeat quickened. He couldn't help but be impressed by her confident demeanor. Well, don't just stand there. Go on, she said, shooing him away gently. Therak hesitated. He wasn't sure he trusted Nyra alone in the command center. However, this would be a good chance to see if she would try to betray him. He glanced over to a gray box near the captain's chair. Nyra's eyes seemed to follow his. The simple gray box was the subspace communicator. He looked back at her, and she quickly glanced away. There was no way she didn't know what that device was. I'll be right back, he said. Then he walked out of the room towards the storage locker in engineering where he had stowed her gear. He didn't rush. Therak may not have been an engineer, but even he knew about how subspace communicators worked. One out of a pair of entangled particles was kept in a communicator. Its partner was kept in a different communicator. When one particle was altered, its entangled mate would be altered in the same way, no matter where it was in the universe. When Therak typed in a message, the facility's subspace communicator altered its particle in such a way that its counterpart in high command could interpret the message, enabling him to communicate with his superiors instantly from anywhere in the galaxy. However, it was likely that the subspace communicator in high command had been destroyed. Since this communicator only contained particles entangled with Pheran high command, there was no way she could get out a message to the Zygomanti Lan or anyone else in Panthera space. Nyra could try all she liked. It wouldn't matter. As for other things she could tinker with, how much trouble could she get into in just a few minutes? Therak tried to reassure himself as he pulled open the clanking metal locker and removed a pair of tool belts, one of which was Nyra's personal set. Seeing her tools reminded him how quickly she had managed to hack the security alarm and break into the facility. The memory caused his hackles to rise. Slamming the locker shut, Therak twisted his bulk through the narrow door of the engineering bay and rushed down the hall back to command. His padded feet pounded on the metal floor as he rocketed around a corner. Reaching command, he pressed his hand on the biometric panel, urging it to open a second faster. The lock clicked, and the door slid open with a hiss to reveal. Nyra perched on the end of her chair, still sitting at the engineering console, looking over the list of error codes. Therak steadied his breathing, feeling out of breath as he handed over her tools while pretending he hadn't just sprinted down the hall. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Fine," he huffed. "Nothing wrong," he puffed. Nyra quirked a brow at him. "Sure, if you say so." She pointed towards the monitor, and she continued. "Anyway, I've made a triage list. Normally for a spacecraft, I'd prioritize structural integrity, B.L.A.D.E, checking and replacing seals, and inspecting the hull for breaches. However, since we landed, priority is life support. The current planet we're on doesn't have a breathable atmosphere, and the CO2 scrubbers and oxygen generators are on yellow, and half the circulation system is on red, meaning either the ducts are clogged or the fans are broken. "Do you think you could deal with the water system first?" he asked. Nyra turned her entire body to face him, an incredulous look on her face. "Which would you rather have, Therak? Air to breathe or water to drink?" she asked. Therak's eyes widened as he realized how odd it was that he was out of breath from sprinting such a short distance. The planet they were on didn't have breathable atmosphere, and the air inside the facility was already growing thin. Therak cleared his throat. "You're right. I don't know what I was thinking." "You weren't thinking," she said. "But that's not surprising. Faulty thinking is one of the first signs of hypoxia. Since you're big, you require more oxygen," she explained. "So for now, just trust what I say and don't question me. We have a lot of work to do and only a couple days to get it done at most," she said while looking at him. "What else is there besides the air and water?" he asked. Leaning over her shoulder, Nyra took a deep breath and she said, "Aside from the air and water, we need to replace all the external seals, check the hull for cracks, repair the insulation and radiation shielding, inspect and repair the power conduits and wiring all over the ship, repair any leaks in the coolant and water lines, repair or replace the radiators, fix the thermal control leaks, repair the HVAC systems to prevent humidity buildup and biofouling within the air ducts, clean the nutrient delivery lines to eliminate decaying organic matter in the food system so we don't get violently ill. And those are just the critical issues. There's a whole other set of high, medium, and low priority tasks," she said. "Damn," said Therak. He had noticed that his stomach had been complaining lately. "Damn is right," she nodded. "You're damned lucky I showed up. Damned lucky I agreed to help you, and damned lucky that I didn't." Her voice trailed off. Therak placed a hand on Nyra's shoulder. "Thank you," he said. Nyra turned away from his gaze, her red eyes betraying how exhausted she was. "I'll make a list of all the parts we need to fab. We need to get started right away," she said. "Make the list and then get some rest. I can print the parts while you sleep," he said. "But the fabricator," she lamented. "You have plenty of time to play with it later. For now, we need to get your nocturnal self into bed," said Therak, taking her hand. "But the air scrubbers," she said. "We need to get that fixed by today." Nyra swayed a little bit on her feet as she stood. It was clear she was barely holding herself together. She was emotionally strong, brilliant, and hard-working. However, she had gone through an immense trauma which was preventing her from sleeping. Therak wanted to give her a hug, not to have intimate touch, but to comfort the poor girl. Yet he knew he didn't have the right to embrace her. Instead, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She glanced at his hand, barely tolerating the touch. "Nyra, saying you've had a rough few days is an understatement. A lesser cat would have broken by now. Let me do the prep work. We can't repair the scrubbers until the parts are printed anyway," said Therak. Nyra closed her eyes and squinched up her face as if she'd bitten into something sour, and she said, "You have no idea how wrong it feels to be consoled by you." "All right, fine." She continued, The parts I need printed are on the triage list I typed into the console. But promise me you'll wake me up as soon as the first part is done printing." "I promise," he said. Nyra nodded and made her way out of the room. When they got to her door, Therak entered a code into the panel and then held his communicator up to the biometric panel. A light on the panel flashed green twice, and there was a beep. "The door is keyed to my communicator now," he said. "Since you're nocturnal, you'll probably be doing most of your work at night when I'm sleeping. In the future, call me, and I'll send a signal to open the door." Nyra narrowed her eyes before she spoke. "You're going to let me, your prisoner, in or out whenever I ask. Is this some kind of test?" she asked. "No," said Therak. "Then where are you going to be?" she asked. "Sleeping," said Therak. "I'm diurnal, and I'm old. I'm not going to stay up all night watching after you," he said. "Then why not just unlock the door?" she asked. "All the doors lock automatically around here when they shut. It's a safety feature," he clarified. "Then let me remove the lock," she said. "The door can just stay open. That way I don't have to wake you." "No!" he roared, causing Nyra to jump. "Why not?" she asked, hands on her hips as she puffed up as big as possible. She was trying to look tough, but Therak could tell she was afraid. Therak knelt to her level and turned his side to her, so that he would be less imposing. "I'm sorry for yelling. It's just that if we leave the door open and there's a decompression, you would be exposed to the vacuum. I don't want you to get hurt." Nyra's brows drew together, confusion evident, as he continued. "In fact, I should probably put an EVA suit in your quarters for emergencies." "Right," she said, nodding slowly to herself. "Because you wouldn't want to lose your precious engineer. You need me, after all." Therak's ears flattened against his skull. He hadn't been thinking about how useful she was, or not. He just genuinely didn't want her to get hurt. After a moment, he sighed and let his frustration go. "Well, I do enjoy breathing," Therak said at last, not wanting to argue. Nyra smirked, then walked inside her room. There was something about her expression he didn't like. He suspected she had assumed that he just wanted to use her, and he had just cemented that notion with his words. It made him feel ill at ease. He couldn't allow that misjudgment of his character to continue. "Nyra," he began, "you seem to be misunderstanding me. I'm not someone who objectifies others. You aren't a tool I wish to use." Nyra stopped on the way to her bed, rounding on him. Her expression was closed and her tail swished back and forth. "Do we really have to have this conversation now?" "When would be better?" Therak asked. "Oh, I don't know. How about when I'm not terrified that I might suffocate in my sleep?" she snapped. "Sorry. I didn't mean for that to come out so harsh. Just make sure to wake me up after the part is done. Have a good rest," he said. "I'll call you in an hour or two. Please have your communicator near you." Therak gave her one last look before pressing his hand against the door panel. Therak left Nyra's quarters, the heavy door sliding shut behind him with a quiet hiss. He exhaled, rubbing his face briefly before setting off toward engineering. His large padded feet made a dull thud against the metal floor as he walked, his mind already shifting toward the task at hand. Engineering was dimly lit, save for the gentle glow of various consoles and monitors. The space smelled of old lubricants and dust. It had been almost a year since he had used this space. Therak moved toward the central workstation, a large console set into the bulkhead, and placed his palm on the biometric scanner. A soft chime signaled his access and the screen flickered to life. Nyra's triage list was already synced from command. As the list scrolled before him, Therak couldn't help but be impressed by the level of detail. Every failing system was categorized with necessary parts, tools, and estimated time to repair. She had even left notes on the best order of operations to minimize the possibility of cascading failures. Wow. he mumbled to himself. How had she managed to do all this in just a few minutes, while exhausted? Was she really just some scrapper? With skills like this, she should be a chief engineer at a government lab or an ace at a top 10 company run by the Zygomantai Lan. Putting aside her identity for now, Therak scrolled down until he found the CO2 scrubbers under the critical category. Selecting the first one, he sent the fabrication request to the AI that controlled the facility's advanced molecular assembler. A pleasant, neutral voice chimed from the overhead speakers. Fabrication request received. Processing now. Therak turned toward the fabrication bay, a reinforced chamber with a transparent panel that allowed him to watch the process unfold. Inside, the assembler whirred to life, its internal mechanisms shifting with fluid precision. A complex web of actuators and molecular forges began constructing the part layer by layer, rearranging matter at an atomic level. The lights inside the chamber pulsed softly as nanite-infused resins and specialized alloys were precisely deposited, cured, and bonded in real time. Within minutes, the rough shape of the scrubber began to form. The entire process was mesmerizing. If the fabricator wasn't so loud, watching it work would have been pleasant. Therak put a set of noise-canceling muffs over his ears, crossed his arms, and waited. When it was done, his eyes flicked to the clock. 1 hour had passed. Nyra had wanted him to wake her as soon as the first part was done. But she looked like she had barely slept in days. He knew how important this was, but he also wanted to pull his weight and let her rest. He could handle this himself. He tapped the console. AI, show me the location and the installation procedure for the CO2 scrubber. The display shifted, bringing up a wireframe model of the facility. The life support system was buried deep within an auxiliary maintenance corridor he had barely visited in 35 years. A schematic zoomed in, showing the failing scrubber's position, marked with a blinking red icon. With a small grunt, Therak retrieved the freshly fabricated component from the assembler's retrieval tray. The part was warm to the touch, fresh from molecular bonding. With careful movements, he secured it in a carrying case and slung it over his shoulder. Navigating the facility was second nature, but as he descended into the maintenance levels, he found himself in corridors less traveled. The air was slightly thicker here, the scent of unfiltered mold more pronounced. It wasn't dangerous yet, but it was a reminder that Nyra had been right. Life support was failing, slowly but surely. Reaching the designated section, he entered a narrow chamber filled with interconnected ductwork, pipes, and thick bundles of cables. The ambient hum of clunky, overworked fans reverberated through the space, masking the occasional hissing of airflow regulation. His sharp eyes scanned the maze of conduits until he spotted the blinking red light in the distance. The scrubber was housed within a cramped access tunnel, much narrower than he had anticipated. He frowned. It was dark, and the passage was barely wide enough to fit someone of his bulk. The sight of the flashing red light, now so obviously in need of replacement, made him wonder how he had never noticed it before. He judged the space, rolling his shoulders. "I can fit," he said to himself. With a deep breath, he crouched low and lined himself up. With a forceful push from his powerful hind legs, he shoved himself into the passage. Metal pressed against his furred shoulders, the tight walls compressing against his ribcage as he wriggled deeper. His ears flattened instinctively against his skull, but he was in. Extending his arms with some difficulty, he reached forward and worked on detaching the failing scrubber. The old unit slid free with a metallic scrape. He twisted, angling the replacement into position and securing it with firm, deliberate movements. The system detected the new part instantly, The blinking red indicator turned green. Success. However, as he exhaled in relief, he quickly realized he had a new problem. He was stuck. Therak attempted to shift his arms, but the moment he brought them down, he heard an unsettling crinkle of metal. The ductwork around him flexed. If he struggled too much, he risked breaking something important, maybe even rupturing the ductwork surrounding him. He tensed, gritting his teeth. This was a very bad position to be in. He could easily rip himself free, but at what cost? Therak wriggled his arms down by his sides, searching for anything to grab onto. The metal ductwork was smooth, offering no purchase, no leverage. He twisted his fingers, feeling around desperately, and his claws brushed against something solid, his communicator. With some difficulty, he managed to slide it up toward his mouth. He hesitated, staring at the device. Did he really have to call for help? A deep sigh escaped his lips. He pressed the button. "Nyra?" A moment later, her voice crackled through, thick with sleep. "Therak? Is the part ready?" she asked. "I've got good news," he said, forcing a light-hearted tone. "The first scrubber part is printed, and I went ahead and installed it." There was silence, then a very unimpressed, "You did what?" Therak winced at the irritation in her voice. "You should have woken me up," she scolded. "I already looked at the layout of the facility. You shouldn't be going into maintenance tunnels alone at your size. You could break something." Therak felt like a cub caught in the act. He cleared his throat. "About that," he started. "I kind of need your help." Nyra sighed. "You're stuck, aren't you?" "Yes," he admitted sheepishly. There was another brief silence. Then, "All right. Unlock my door and tell me where you are," she said. "I'll come help." Therak pressed a sequence into his communicator, sending the signal to unlock her quarters. "I'm in the lower maintenance tunnels near Section A5. If you leave your room and take a right—" "I know where that is," Nyra cut in. Therak blinked. "You do?" "I looked at the ship's layout once," she said. "I have perfect recall. I know exactly where you are. You don't have to explain." Therak shook his head. Suddenly, her inexplicable skills started to make sense. Perfect recall was a skill some elite dark cats had, which enabled them to remember everything, so long as they had encountered it once. That meant she'd never forget what she was about to see. Minutes passed, and then he heard the distant sound of light footsteps approaching. "Therak?" Nyra's voice echoed through the chamber. "Over here," he called back. As she came closer, Nyra let out a bubbling, unrestrained cackle. Her unbridled amusement rumbled from her chest. Therak's ears flattened against his skull at the sound. After she stopped laughing for a moment, she said, "A mighty Pheran soldier, defeated by a Crawlspace." She was clearly amused. Therak scowled. "Very funny now. Help me, please," he said, wiggling his feet for emphasis. Nyra wiped away a tear of mirth as she stepped forward. All right. Let's get you out of there before you start making this your new den." She crouched down, grabbed his ankles, and yanked. Therak barely budged. "Damn," she muttered. "You really jammed yourself in there, didn't you?" With a grunt, she adjusted her stance, planted her feet, and pulled harder as Therak wiggled in tandem. Slowly, very slowly, he began to inch backward. Then she grabbed the base of his tail. Wait! Therak started, but before he could protest, she hauled with all her strength. Pop! His shoulders came free, and Nyra tumbled backward with the force, landing flat on her back with a startled oof. Therak, now freed, crawled backwards until he found himself, paws planted on either side of her body, with her head between his legs and his head between hers. Their eyes met, connecting in the space between their bodies. For a moment, neither of them moved. Therak's heart skipped a beat, but he shoved the feeling aside, quickly standing and offering her a hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet. Their gazes lingered on each other for just a second too long, something unspoken passing between them. "Thank you," he said. Before Nyra could say anything, a mechanical tone chimed a warning from the facility's speakers. Warning: oxygen levels below safe limits. Crew advised to wear masks. A yellow light flickered above them. The calm but firm voice of the facility's AI breaking the moment. Nyra exhaled, rolling her shoulders. "We need to get to work." Therak nodded. "Yeah." Without another word, they turned and hurried toward the next task.